It was a bright, sunny morning in Maple Grove. Maple Grove was a tiny little town. Nothing big ever happened there. The streets were quiet. The houses were neat. The lawns were green and tidy. Birds chirped in the trees. Kids rode bikes down the sidewalks. Everything seemed perfect. Or at least, that's what everyone thought. In the middle of all those pretty houses lived a man named Sam Carter. Sam was new in town. He didn't talk much. He didn't wave a lot. He just kept to himself. Sam had moved into a small house at the end of Oak Street. Oak Street was a nice road with big trees and happy families. But Sam's house? It didn't look like the others. His house was old. The paint was peeling off the walls. Big flakes of white and blue fell to the ground every time the wind blew. The grass in his yard was super tall. It grew so high it almost hid the front steps. The mailbox by the road was rusty. It leaned to one side like it was tired and ready to fall over. Every time someone walked by, they'd stare at it. They'd shake their heads. "What a mess," they'd mutter. Sam didn't seem to mind the messy house. He didn't run outside with a lawnmower. He didn't grab a paintbrush to fix the walls. He didn't even straighten the mailbox. He'd just walk out his door, look around, and smile. Then he'd wave at anyone watching and go back inside. That was Sam. Quiet. Calm. Different. The people in Maple Grove noticed him right away. They didn't like how different he was. They liked their town to look perfect. All the houses had to be clean. All the yards had to be neat. Sam's house stuck out like a sore thumb. It bugged them. A lot. "Who is this guy?" they'd whisper to each other. They'd stand on their porches, sipping lemonade, and point at his house. "Why doesn't he fix that dump?" they'd ask. "Doesn't he care?" Some of them even made up stories about him. "Maybe he's lazy," one lady said. "Maybe he's hiding something," a man added. "Maybe he doesn't belong here," a kid chimed in. But Sam didn't argue. He didn't get mad. He didn't explain himself. He'd just keep doing his thing. Every morning, he'd step outside. He'd stretch his arms, take a deep breath, and look at the sky. Then he'd wave at whoever was staring. His wave was small. His smile was quick. And then poof, he'd disappear back inside. Day after day, it was the same. The neighbors didn't know what to think. Some of them tried to be nice at first. Mrs. Jenkins, who lived next door, baked him cookies. She put them in a little red tin and left them on his porch. "Welcome to Maple Grove," she wrote on a note. The next day, the tin was still there. The cookies were still inside. Sam never touched them. Mrs. Jenkins frowned. "That's rude," she said to her husband. "Who doesn't eat cookies?" Mr. Peterson, who lived across the street, tried talking to Sam once. He walked over one afternoon with a big grin. "Hey, neighbor," he called. "Nice day, huh? You need help fixing that mailbox?" Sam looked at him. He smiled that little smile again. "Nah, I'm good," he said. Then he turned and went back inside. Mr. Peterson stood there, confused. "Weird guy," he mumbled as he walked away. Kids in the neighborhood made it a game. They'd ride their bikes past Sam's house and yell stuff. "Fix your grass," one shouted. "Paint your house," another giggled. Sam never yelled back. He'd just peek out the window, wave, and close the curtain. The kids thought it was funny. "He's so strange," they'd say, laughing. But not everyone laughed. Some people got annoyed. Really annoyed. They didn't like that Sam ignored their rules. In Maple Grove, everyone followed the rules. You had to mow your lawn every week. You had to paint your house if it looked old. You had to keep your mailbox standing straight. Sam didn't do any of that. And it drove them nuts. One lady, Mrs. Carter, no relation to Sam, talked about him all the time. She lived 3 houses down. She had a perfect yard with pink flowers and a little white fence. She'd stand by her gate, hands on her hips, and glare at Sam's house. "It's a disgrace," she'd say to anyone who'd listen. "He's ruining our street. Someone should do something." The more they talked, the more they watched Sam. Every day, they'd peek out their windows. They'd look for clues. What was he doing in there? Why didn't he care? Was he just lazy? Or was something else going on? They didn't know. But they were dying to find out. Sam didn't give them answers. He didn't chat with them. He didn't invite them over. He didn't even seem to notice how much they stared. He'd leave his house sometimes, walking down the street with his hands in his pockets. He didn't drive a car. He didn't ride a bike. He just walked. And when he came back, he'd go straight inside. Door shut. Curtains closed. Silence. One morning, something weird happened. A black van parked in front of Sam's house. It sat there for an hour. The windows were dark. No one could see inside. Two men stepped out. They wore black suits and sunglasses. They looked serious. They knocked on Sam's door. He opened it, nodded, and let them in. The neighbors watched, wide-eyed. "Who are those guys?" Mrs. Jenkins whispered to Mr. Peterson. "I don't know," he said. "But I don't like it." The men stayed for 20 minutes. Then they left. The van drove away. Sam came outside, looked around, and waved like nothing happened. The neighbors were buzzing. "What was that about?" they asked each other. "Is he in trouble? Is he dangerous?" No one had a clue. But they all agreed on one thing: Sam was hiding something. Days turned into weeks. Sam kept being Sam. Quiet. Calm. Strange. His grass grew taller. His paint peeled more. His mailbox leaned even lower. The neighbors stopped trying to be nice. They stopped baking cookies. They stopped saying hello. They just watched and waited. Something big was coming. They could feel it. What nobody knew, what nobody even guessed, was that Sam had a secret. A huge secret. It wasn't just about his messy house. It wasn't about being lazy. It was something way bigger. Something that would flip Maple Grove upside down. Something that would make their jaws drop. Something that would change everything. Sam wasn't just some random guy. He wasn't a nobody. He was someone important. Someone powerful. Someone they'd never suspect. And while they whispered and glared, Sam knew exactly what he was doing. He wasn't scared. He wasn't worried. He was waiting. Waiting for the perfect moment. The sun kept shining in Maple Grove. The birds kept chirping. The kids kept riding their bikes. Everything looked normal. But it wasn't. Not even close. Sam's secret was like a storm brewing quietly in the distance. You couldn't see it yet. You couldn't hear it. But it was there. And when it hit, nobody would be ready. So who was Sam Carter? Why was he here? What was he hiding? The neighbors didn't know. They thought he was just a weird guy with a messy house. They thought he didn't belong. They thought they had him figured out. Boy, were they wrong. Maple Grove was a quiet little town, but trouble was about to start. And it all began with a lady named Linda Grayson. Linda was the boss of the Homeowners Association, or HOA for short. Everyone in Maple Grove had a secret nickname for her, HOA Karen. They called her that behind her back because she acted like she owned everything. Linda was loud. She was bossy. And she thought the whole street belonged to her. Linda wasn't like most people. She didn't just sit around quietly. Oh no. She was always busy telling everyone what to do. She wore bright pink jackets that you could see from a mile away. She carried a big clipboard everywhere she went. That clipboard was her weapon. She'd write nasty notes on it and stick them on people's doors. If your grass was too tall, she'd write, "Grass too tall. Fine." If you put your trash can out too early, she'd scribble, "Trash can out. Warning." Linda loved her rules. She loved them more than anything. In Maple Grove, Linda was like a queen. She walked around with her nose in the air. She'd point at houses and tell people what was wrong. "Your fence is crooked," she'd yell at one neighbor. "Your flowers are too wild," she'd snap at another. Everyone had to listen to her. If they didn't, she'd make their lives hard. She'd bang on their doors. She'd call meetings. She'd even fine them money. Nobody wanted to mess with Linda. But there was one person who didn't follow her rules. His name was Sam Carter. Sam lived in that messy house at the end of Oak Street. His grass was super tall. His paint was peeling. His mailbox was falling over. Linda hated it. She hated it more than anything in the world. Every time she walked by Sam's house, her face turned red. Her eyes got narrow. She'd grip her clipboard so tight her knuckles went white. "That house is a disaster," she'd say. "It's ruining my street." Linda couldn't stand Sam. She didn't like how quiet he was. She didn't like how he didn't care. Most people in Maple Grove tried to keep her happy. They'd mow their lawns fast. They'd paint their houses quick. They'd fix their mailboxes the second she complained. But Sam didn't do any of that. He'd just smile and wave. That made Linda mad. Really, really mad. One sunny day, Linda had enough. She woke up early. She put on her brightest pink jacket. She grabbed her clipboard. She marched down Oak Street like a soldier going to war. Her shoes clicked on the sidewalk. Click, click, click. The neighbors peeked out their windows. "Oh no," they whispered. "Linda's on the move." They knew something big was coming. Linda stopped right in front of Sam's house. She looked at the tall grass. She stared at the peeling paint. She glared at the leaning mailbox. Her nose wrinkled up like she smelled something bad. Then she took a deep breath and stomped up to Sam's front door. She banged on it hard. Bam! 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 The sound echoed down the street. Birds flew out of the trees. Kids stopped riding their bikes to watch. Sam opened the door. He stood there, calm as ever. His hair was a little messy. His shirt was plain. He didn't look scared. He didn't look mad. He just looked at Linda and waited. Linda didn't wait. She started yelling right away. "This place is an eyesore," she shouted. Her voice was so loud the whole block could hear. "Look at this junk pile. It's a mess. You've got 1 week to fix it, or I'll make sure this house gets torn down." The neighbors gasped. Torn down? That was big. Linda wasn't playing around. She waved her clipboard in the air like a flag. 1 week, she yelled again. "You hear me? 1 week." Sam didn't move. He didn't yell back. He didn't even blink. He just looked at her with his little smile. "Okay, Linda," he said. His voice was soft. "Whatever you say." Then he closed the door. Quietly. Click. Linda stood there, frozen. Her mouth opened. Then it closed. She couldn't believe it. "Whatever you say," she muttered. "Whatever you say." She turned around and stomped back down the steps. Her face was redder than ever. "He thinks he can ignore me," she said to herself. "Oh, no. He's wrong. He's so wrong." Linda didn't stop there. She didn't go home and forget about it. Nope. She went straight to work. She started telling everyone about Sam. She walked to Mrs. Jenkins' house first. "That Sam Carter is lazy," she said. "He doesn't care about our town." Mrs. Jenkins nodded. She was too scared to say no. Then Linda went to Mr. Peterson's house. "He's a troublemaker," she told him. "A total nobody." Mr. Peterson nodded too. He didn't want trouble. Every day, Linda talked about Sam. She'd stand on the corner with her clipboard. She'd wave her hands and yell. "He doesn't belong here," she'd huff. "His house is ugly. He's ruining everything." She even called a big neighborhood meeting. Everyone had to come. They sat in the community room, looking nervous. Linda stood up front. Her pink jacket glowed under the lights. She pointed at a picture of Sam's house on the wall. "Look at this," she said. "This is a disgrace. I'll take care of him. Don't you worry." The neighbors didn't say much. They just nodded along. They were too afraid to argue. Linda was loud. Linda was mean. Linda always got her way. If they said no, she'd turn on them next. So they sat there, quiet, while Linda ranted. "I'll fix this," she promised. "I'll make him sorry he ever moved here." But while Linda yelled and planned, Sam stayed calm. He didn't fight back. He didn't shout. He didn't even seem to care. Every morning, he'd step outside. He'd look at the sky. He'd wave at the neighbors peeking out their windows. Then he'd go back inside. Day after day, he did the same thing. Quiet as a mouse. Linda didn't see it, but Sam was watching. He saw her march around. He heard her yell. He knew she was mad. But he didn't flinch. He didn't run. He just kept smiling that little smile. What Linda didn't know, what nobody knew, was that Sam wasn't scared. Not even a little bit. He wasn't worried about her rules. He wasn't afraid of her clipboard. He wasn't even mad about her threats. Linda thought she was the queen. She thought she could boss Sam around. She thought he was weak. She thought he was nothing. But she was wrong. Sam had a trick up his sleeve. A big one. Linda was picking a fight she didn't understand. She was loud and pushy, but Sam was smart and sneaky. The neighbors watched it all. They saw Linda get madder every day. They saw Sam stay cool and quiet. They didn't know who to cheer for. Linda was mean, but she'd been in charge forever. Sam was new, but he didn't seem to care. What's going to happen? They whispered to each other. Is Linda going to win? Or is Sam hiding something? The air in Maple Grove felt heavy. Something big was coming. Linda kept pushing. Sam kept waiting. The fight was just starting. And nobody, not Linda, not the neighbors, had any idea how wild it was about to get. Days went by in Maple Grove, and things got crazy. Linda Grayson, the bossy lady everyone called HOA Karen, was getting madder every single day. She couldn't stand Sam Carter. Sam lived in that messy house on Oak Street. His lawn was a jungle. The grass grew so tall it looked like a forest. His house was old and falling apart. Big chunks of paint peeled off the walls and landed in the dirt. Old newspapers piled up by his front door. They turned yellow in the sun. Sam didn't touch them. He didn't mow. He didn't paint. He didn't do anything. Linda watched it all from her house down the street. Every morning, she'd peek out her window. She'd see Sam step outside, stretch his arms, and wave. That little wave drove her nuts. Why doesn't he fix it? She'd mutter. Why doesn't he care? She'd grab her clipboard and scribble notes. Tall grass bad, she'd write. Peeling paint ugly, she'd add. Newspapers messy, she'd scribble some more. Her clipboard was full of complaints about Sam. Sam didn't change a thing. Days turned into weeks. The grass got taller. The paint peeled more. The newspapers stacked higher. Linda's face got redder. She'd stomp around her kitchen, talking to herself. He's lazy, she'd say. He's rude, she'd huff. He's making my street look bad. She'd sip her coffee and glare out the window. She hated seeing Sam's house. It made her so mad she could scream. One morning, Linda couldn't take it anymore. She woke up early. The sun was just coming up. She put on her bright pink jacket. She grabbed her coffee mug. She took one big sip, then bam, she slammed it down on her kitchen table. Coffee splashed everywhere. That's it, she yelled. Her voice was so loud it shook the walls. If he won't fix it, I will. She wasn't kidding. Linda had a plan. A big, wild plan. She picked up her phone. She called a bulldozer crew. Yep, a real bulldozer crew. They had big machines that could smash anything. Linda told them a lie. There's an old house on Oak Street, she said. It's abandoned. Nobody lives there. Tear it down. The man on the phone said, "Are you sure?" Linda snapped, "Yes. I'm doing this neighborhood a favor." She hung up and smiled. She thought she'd finally win. The next day, the bulldozer came. It was huge. It was yellow. It rolled down Oak Street with a loud rumble. The ground shook a little. The engine growled like a monster. Neighbors heard it coming. They peeked out their windows. Mrs. Jenkins pulled her curtains back. "What's that noise?" she whispered. Mr. Peterson stuck his head out his door. "Is that a bulldozer?" he asked. Kids stopped playing in their yards. Everyone stared. The bulldozer stopped right in front of Sam's house. Linda was there waiting. She stood on the sidewalk with her arms crossed. Her pink jacket glowed in the sun. She had a big smirk on her face. She looked like she'd just won a prize. The driver climbed out of the bulldozer. He was a big guy with a hard hat. "This the house?" he asked. Linda nodded fast. "Yes," she said. "Tear it down. Now." The driver shrugged. He climbed back in. He turned on the engine. It roared even louder. The neighbors held their breath. Is she really doing this? Mrs. Jenkins whispered to her husband. She's crazy. Mr. Peterson said back. The kids watched with wide eyes. They'd never seen anything like this before. The bulldozer moved forward. Its big metal scoop lifted up. Then crunch, it smashed right into Sam's front porch. Wood broke into pieces. Splinters flew everywhere. Dust puffed up like a cloud. The porch cracked and fell apart. Linda clapped her hands. Yes, she cheered. Finally. She jumped up and down a little. She was so happy. She thought she'd beat Sam at last. The bulldozer pulled back. It got ready to smash again. Linda kept smiling. She didn't care about the noise. She didn't care about the mess. She just wanted Sam's house gone. The neighbors kept watching. Some of them were scared. What if Sam comes back? A kid asked. He's not here, another kid said. He left this morning. Nobody knew where Sam went. He'd been gone all day. But then out of nowhere Sam showed up. He walked right onto Oak Street. He'd been gone all morning, and now he was back. He didn't run. He didn't yell. He didn't look mad. He just stepped out calm as ever. His hands were in his pockets. His face was quiet. He walked straight toward the bulldozer. The driver didn't see him at first. The engine was too loud. Sam stopped right in front of the big machine. The scoop was up, ready to smash again. Sam didn't flinch. He just raised one hand. Stop, he said. His voice wasn't loud, but it was strong. The driver heard him. He hit the brakes fast. The bulldozer screeched to a halt. Dust swirled around Sam's feet. He stood there like nothing was wrong. Linda's smirk disappeared. Her face turned bright red. Her eyes got big. What do you think you're doing? She screamed. She stomped toward Sam. Her clipboard shook in her hand. This is my street, she yelled. You can't stop this. Get out of the way. She was so mad she looked like she might explode. The neighbors gasped. They'd never seen Linda this angry. Sam didn't move. He didn't shout back. He didn't even blink. He just looked at Linda. His little smile came back. You might want to rethink that, he said. His voice was soft. His eyes were steady. He didn't sound scared. He didn't sound worried. He sounded like he knew something Linda didn't. Linda froze. Rethink that, she repeated. Rethink that. She laughed a loud, mean laugh. You're nobody, she shouted. You don't tell me what to do. She waved her clipboard at him. This house is coming down. You can't stop me. She turned to the driver. Go, she yelled. Smash it. But the driver didn't move. He looked at Sam. Something about Sam made him pause. Sam wasn't big. He wasn't loud. But he had a look. A strong, quiet look. The driver scratched his head. Lady, he said to Linda. Maybe we should wait. Linda spun around. Wait, she screeched. No waiting. Do it now. Sam didn't say anything else. He just stood there. The neighbors watched. They didn't know what to think. Linda was yelling. The bulldozer was ready. But Sam? Sam was calm. Too calm. What's he doing? Mrs. Jenkins whispered. Why isn't he mad? Mr. Peterson wondered. The kids leaned closer. He's weird, one said. He's cool, another whispered. Linda kept screaming. You're done, Sam, she shouted. This house is gone. You're gone. She pointed at the bulldozer. Go. Smash it all. But Sam didn't budge. He didn't run away. He didn't yell back. He just waited. And that waiting? It made Linda even madder. She didn't know it, but Sam was ready. He had something up his sleeve. Something big. The air felt thick. The street was quiet except for Linda's yells. The bulldozer sat there, rumbling. The neighbors held their breath. Something was about to happen. They could feel it. Sam wasn't just some guy with a messy house. He was more. And Linda? She was about to find out. The air on Oak Street was buzzing. Linda Grayson stood there, yelling at Sam Carter. Her bulldozer was ready to smash his house. The neighbors watched, holding their breath. Linda's face was red. Her bright pink jacket shook as she waved her arms. She laughed a loud, mean laugh that echoed down the street. "Rethink it," she shouted at Sam. "You're nobody. Get out of my way." She pointed at him like he was a bug she could squash. Sam didn't move. He didn't run. He didn't yell back. He just stood there, right in front of the big yellow bulldozer. His hands were in his pockets. His face was calm. Linda kept screaming. "You can't stop me," she said. "This is my street. My rules." She turned to the bulldozer driver and waved her clipboard. "Go. Smash it now," she ordered. The driver scratched his head. He didn't know what to do. But then, Sam did something. He reached into his jacket. Slow and steady. Everyone watched. Linda stopped yelling for a second. The neighbors leaned closer. What was he doing? Sam pulled out something small. Something shiny. He held it up in the sun. It sparkled. It was a badge. Not just any badge, a federal agent badge. Big bold letters on it said, FBI. The crowd gasped. A loud "oh" went up from the neighbors. Mrs. Jenkins dropped her coffee cup. It smashed on her porch. Mr. Peterson's eyes got huge. The kids on their bikes stopped pedaling. Linda's jaw dropped so fast it looked like it might hit the ground. Her clipboard slipped from her hand. It clattered on the sidewalk. What? She whispered. She couldn't believe it. Sam held the badge high. He looked at Linda. His voice was steady. Strong. "Linda Grayson," he said. "I've been watching you for months." Linda blinked. She didn't move. Sam kept talking. "You've been breaking laws. Big ones. You've been mean to people. You've been harassing them. You've been making fake papers. And now, you're destroying my house. That ends today." The neighbors gasped again. "Breaking laws?" Mrs. Jenkins whispered. "Fake papers," Mr. Peterson muttered. The kids looked at each other. "Whoa," one said. "Sam's a cop," another asked. Linda shook her head. "No," she yelled. "No way." But Sam didn't stop. He turned to the bulldozer driver. "You're done here," he said. "Leave." His voice wasn't loud, but it was tough. The driver nodded fast. He didn't argue. He climbed back into the bulldozer. The engine roared. The tires squealed as he drove off. Dust flew everywhere. Linda watched, her mouth open. "Wait," she shouted. "Come back." But the bulldozer was gone. It rolled down Oak Street and disappeared around the corner. Sam's house was still standing. The smashed porch was messy, but the rest was okay. Linda turned to Sam. Her face was bright red now. Her hands shook. This is a mistake," she stammered. "You can't do this. You're lying." She pointed at him again. "You're not a cop. You're just some guy. Some lazy guy with a junk house." She was yelling so loud her voice cracked. But Sam didn't flinch. He didn't get mad. He just looked at her with that little smile. Then Sam did something else. He pulled out his phone. It was a plain black phone. Nothing fancy. He pressed a button and held it to his ear. "Yeah, it's Carter," he said. His voice was calm. "Bring the team in." Linda frowned. "Team," she said. "What team?" The neighbors whispered. "What's he talking about?" Mrs. Jenkins asked. "I don't know," Mr. Peterson said. Everyone waited. Minutes later, they heard it. A rumble. Louder than the bulldozer. Big black SUVs rolled onto Oak Street. 3 of them. Their lights flashed red and blue. Their tires screeched as they stopped. Doors flew open. Men and women jumped out. They wore dark suits. They had sunglasses. They carried handcuffs. They looked serious. Really serious. The neighbors went wild. "Whoa," a kid shouted. "Cops," another yelled. Mrs. Jenkins grabbed her husband's arm. FBI, she said. Mr. Peterson nodded. Real agents, he added. The kids dropped their bikes and ran closer. Linda's face went white. Her pink jacket didn't look so powerful anymore. She looked small. Scared. No, she whispered. No, no, no. Sam put his phone away. He stepped forward. The agents lined up behind him. They didn't smile. They didn't talk. They just waited for Sam to tell them what to do. Sam looked at Linda. You're done, Linda, he said. You've been bossing people around too long. You've been breaking rules. You thought you could smash my house? Wrong. I'm here to stop you. Linda shook her head. This isn't real, she yelled. You can't arrest me. I'm in charge. I'm the HOA queen. She stomped her foot. I make the rules. But the agents didn't care. One of them, a tall lady with short hair, stepped up. She held up her own badge. FBI, she said. Linda Grayson, you're under arrest. Linda's eyes got huge. Arrest, she screeched. Me. She tried to run. She turned and took 2 steps. But another agent, a big guy with a buzz cut, grabbed her arm. Not so fast, he said. He pulled out handcuffs. They clicked open. Linda twisted and yelled. Let me go. You can't do this. But the cuffs snapped shut. Click. Click. Her hands were stuck. The neighbors cheered. Yes. Mrs. Jenkins clapped. She's gone. Mr. Peterson laughed. The kids jumped up and down. Take her away, they shouted. Linda kept screaming. This is wrong. I'm innocent. Sam's the bad guy. But nobody listened. The agents pulled her toward the SUV. Her pink jacket flapped as she kicked and yelled. Sam watched it all. He didn't cheer. He didn't laugh. He just stood there, calm and cool. The agents opened the SUV door. They pushed Linda inside. She banged on the window. You'll be sorry, she shouted. All of you. But the door slammed shut. The SUV's engine started. The lights flashed again. And then they drove off. Linda was gone. The street got quiet. The neighbors looked at Sam. He put his badge back in his jacket. He turned to them. Sorry about the mess, he said. He pointed at his smashed porch. I'll fix it soon. Mrs. Jenkins smiled. You're an agent, she asked. Sam nodded. Yeah, he said. FBI. Been here watching Linda. Mr. Peterson stepped up. She's been bad, he asked. Sam nodded again. Real bad, he said. She's been lying. Stealing. Hurting people. I had to stop her. The kids ran over. You're so cool, one said. Like a superhero, another added. Sam smiled, a bigger smile this time. Just doing my job, he said. The neighbors couldn't believe it. Sam wasn't just some guy. He was a hero. A real FBI agent. Linda thought she could beat him. She thought she was the boss. But she was wrong. Sam had the power all along. And now, Linda was in big trouble. The big reveal was over. And Maple Grove would never be the same. Oak Street was buzzing. The big black SUVs were there. The lights flashed red and blue. The FBI agents had Linda Grayson in handcuffs. Her bright pink jacket flapped as she twisted and yelled. The neighbors watched, stunned. They couldn't believe their eyes. Linda, the mean, bossy Hoa Karen, was finally caught. Her clipboard was on the ground. Her power was gone. Linda's face was red. Her eyes were wild. You can't arrest me, she shrieked. Her voice was so loud it hurt everyone's ears. I'm in charge here. I'm the queen of the street. She kicked her feet and pulled at the handcuffs. The metal clicked and clanked. But the agents didn't let go. They held her tight. She couldn't get away. Sam Carter stood nearby. He was calm. He didn't yell. He didn't cheer. He just watched. Then he shook his head. Not anymore, he said. His voice was soft but strong. You've been bullying people for too long. You've been mean. You've been bad. Now you're going to jail. Linda's eyes got huge. Jail, she shouted. No. You can't do this. But Sam didn't answer. He didn't need to. The agents pulled Linda toward the SUV. She screamed the whole way. Let me go. This is wrong. I'm the boss, she yelled. The neighbors didn't feel sorry for her. They'd had enough of her rules. They'd had enough of her clipboard. They'd had enough of her mean words. Now she was done. The agents opened the SUV door. They pushed Linda inside. She banged on the window with her cuffed hands. You'll be sorry, she shouted. All of you. But the door slammed shut. Bang. The sound echoed down the street. The engine roared. The tires spun. The SUVs drove off, fast. Linda was gone. Her pink jacket disappeared with her. The street got quiet. The neighbors looked at each other. Then they cheered. Yes. Mrs. Jenkins clapped her hands. She's gone. Mr. Peterson laughed. The kids jumped up and down. No more HOA Karen, they shouted. They ran around, happy and free. The air felt lighter. The sun seemed brighter. Linda's reign was over. For good. Sam turned to his house. The front porch was smashed from the bulldozer. Wood stuck out everywhere. Dust covered the steps. But the rest of the house was still standing. He looked at it for a minute. Then he smiled. A little smile. The neighbors watched him. They didn't know what to say. They'd been wrong about him. So wrong. Later that week, something changed. Sam started fixing his house. Not because he had to. Not because Linda told him to. But because he wanted to. He didn't rush. He took his time. One morning, he came outside with a lawnmower. It was old and rusty, but it worked. He pushed it through the tall grass. Buzz, buzz, buzz. The blades cut the weeds down. The yard started to look neat. The neighbors couldn't believe it. He's mowing. Mrs. Jenkins said. She stood on her porch, watching. Finally. Mr. Peterson nodded. He leaned on his fence, smiling. The kids rode their bikes by. Cool, one yelled. Sam waved at them. That little wave he always did. But this time, they waved back. Big waves. Happy waves. The next day, Sam got paint. He went to the store and came back with cans. White paint. Blue paint. He set them by the house. He grabbed a brush. He started painting the walls. Up and down. Side to side. The peeling paint disappeared. The house turned bright and clean. Wow, Mrs. Jenkins said. It's pretty now. Mr. Peterson agreed. He's good at this, he said. Sam kept working. He fixed the mailbox too. It was leaning over, all rusty and sad. He pulled it out of the ground. He got a hammer. He got nails. He banged it straight. Bang, bang, bang. Then he painted it silver. It stood tall again. The neighbors walked by. Nice mailbox, a kid shouted. Sam smiled. Thanks, he said. People started coming over. Not to yell. Not to complain. But to talk. Mrs. Jenkins brought cookies again. This time, Sam took them. Yum, he said. Thanks. She smiled big. You're welcome, she said. Mr. Peterson stopped by too. Sorry I didn't help you before, he said. Linda was so mean. Sam nodded. That's okay, he said. I get it. More neighbors came. They said sorry too. We didn't know who you were, they said. We thought you were just some guy. We didn't stand up to Linda. We were scared. Sam listened. He didn't get mad. He didn't yell at them. He just smiled. That's okay, he said again. I was here to do a job. And it's done now. The kids crowded around him. Are you really an FBI agent? One asked. Sam laughed a little. Yeah, he said. I am. Their eyes got big. Cool, they shouted. Did you catch bad guys? Another asked. Sam nodded. Sometimes, he said. Like Linda, a girl asked. Sam smiled bigger. Yeah, he said. Like Linda. Turns out, Sam had been undercover. That means he was hiding who he really was. He came to Maple Grove to watch Linda. She'd been doing bad stuff for a long time. She made fake papers to trick people. She took money she wasn't supposed to. She bullied everyone with her rules. Sam knew all about it. He'd been waiting for the right time to stop her. The neighbors couldn't believe it. "You were a secret agent?" Mrs. Jenkins asked. "Yep," Sam said. "Why didn't you tell us?" Mr. Peterson said. Sam shrugged. "Had to keep it quiet," he said. "Linda couldn't know." The kids jumped up. "That's awesome," they cheered. "You're a hero." Sam kept fixing his house. Every day, it looked better. The grass was short. The paint was fresh. The mailbox stood straight. The newspapers were gone. He picked them up and threw them away. The neighbors helped sometimes. They brought lemonade. They brought tools. They said, "We're a team now." Sam liked that. Maple Grove felt different. No more Linda. No more mean notes. No more clipboard. People smiled more. They talked more. They weren't scared anymore. "It's so nice now," Mrs. Jenkins said. "Thanks to Sam," Mr. Peterson added. The kids ran around. "Sam's the best," they shouted. Sam finished his house one day. He stepped back and looked at it. It was pretty. White walls. Blue trim. Green grass. Silver mailbox. He nodded. "Looks good," he said to himself. The neighbors clapped. "Great job," they said. Sam waved. "Thanks," he said. Teamwork. That night, they had a party. A big one. In the street. They brought food. Cookies. Hot dogs. Juice. They played music. They danced. Sam came too. He didn't talk much, but he smiled a lot. "You saved us," Mrs. Jenkins said. "From Linda," Mr. Peterson added. Sam shrugged. "Just doing my job," he said. The party went late. Stars came out. The street was happy. Sam was the hero nobody saw coming. Linda was in jail. Maple Grove was free. Justice was served. And everyone knew Sam Carter was the best neighbor ever. Wow, what a wild ride, huh? Linda Grayson thought she was the big boss of Maple Grove. She yelled. She bossed people around. She even tried to smash Sam Carter's house with a bulldozer. But guess what? She lost. Big time. Sam turned out to be a secret FBI agent. He stopped her. He saved the day. And now Linda's in jail, while Sam's the hero. So, what's the lesson here? Let's talk about it. Sometimes, the quiet guy, the one everyone picks on, is the strongest person around. Think about it. Sam didn't talk a lot. He didn't fight back when Linda was mean. He didn't mow his grass or paint his house right away. People looked at him and thought, he's lazy. He's weak. He's nobody. They picked on him. They whispered about him. Linda laughed at him. She thought she could push him down easy. But boy, was she wrong. Sam wasn't weak. He wasn't lazy. He was strong. Really strong. He had a big secret, his FBI badge. He was watching Linda the whole time. He knew she was bad. He waited for the perfect moment. And when it came, boom. He showed everyone who he really was. Linda didn't see it coming. Nobody did. That's the cool thing about Sam. His power was hidden. Quiet. Sneaky. Linda thought she could beat him because she was loud. She had her clipboard. She had her rules. She had her pink jacket. She looked big and tough on the outside. She thought that made her the winner. But outside stuff? It doesn't always tell the truth. Linda was mean inside. She bullied people. She lied. She broke laws. That's why she lost. Sam. He was good inside. He was smart. He was brave. That's why he won. So here's the big lesson: don't judge people by what you see on the outside. You might look at someone and think, they're not strong. They're not special. But you don't know what's inside them. The real power? It's hiding where you least expect it. Sam looked like just some guy with a messy house. But he was a hero. A real one. Linda had no idea who she was messing with. And that's what got her in trouble. Think about your own life. Do you know someone quiet? Someone who doesn't show off? Maybe they're stronger than you think. Maybe they've got something cool hiding inside. Like Sam. He didn't need to yell. He didn't need to brag. He just did his job. He waited. He won. That's real strength. Not loud stuff. Not mean stuff. Quiet, smart stuff. Linda learned that the hard way. She thought being loud made her the boss. She thought pushing people around made her big. But it didn't. It made her fall. Hard. Sam didn't have to push anyone. He didn't have to be mean. He just used his brain. He used his badge. He used his team. And now, he's the one everyone likes. Linda's the one everyone's glad to see gone. What about you? Have you ever judged someone too fast? Maybe you saw someone with messy hair and thought, they're not cool. Or someone who didn't talk much and thought, they're boring. But maybe they're awesome. Maybe they're like Sam. Hiding something big. Something strong. You never know until you give them a chance. That's the fun part of life. People surprise you. The quiet kid in class. Maybe they're super smart. The shy girl next door? Maybe she's really brave. The guy who doesn't fight back. Maybe he's got a plan. Like Sam. He surprised everyone. Linda thought she had him beat. She thought she was smarter. Tougher. Better. Nope. Sam was the real deal. So next time you see someone, don't just look at the outside. Don't just see the messy yard or the old clothes. Look deeper. Think, what's their story? What's inside? Because that's where the good stuff hides. That's where the power is. Sam showed us that. He showed Linda. He showed Maple Grove. He showed us all. And here's another thing: be like Sam. You don't have to be loud to be strong. You don't have to yell to win. You can be quiet. You can be kind. You can wait for the right time. Linda was loud and mean, and she lost. Sam was quiet and good, and he won. Which one would you rather be? The loud bully? Or the quiet hero? I know what I'd pick. Maple Grove is happy now. Linda's gone. Sam's house is fixed. The neighbors are friends. It's all because Sam didn't give up. He didn't let Linda scare him. He didn't let her push him down. He stood up when it mattered. That's what heroes do. They don't always look like heroes at first. But when the time comes, they shine. So what did you think of the story? Did Linda get what she deserved? I think she did. She was mean for way too long. She thought she could do whatever she wanted. But Sam stopped her. He showed her she's not the boss. Jail's the perfect place for her, right? What do you say? Tell me in the comments. And hey, where are you watching from today? Are you at home? At school? Somewhere cool? Drop it in the comments too. I love hearing from you. It's so fun to know where you are. Maybe you're in a big city. Maybe a small town like Maple Grove. Wherever you are, I'm glad you're here with me. If you loved this story, hit that like button. It's that little heart thingy down there. Tap it. It tells me you had fun. And if you want more wild tales like this, hit subscribe. It's super easy. Just click the button. Then you'll see all my stories. I've got tons more to tell you. Crazy ones. Funny ones. Awesome ones. You won't miss a thing. Sam's story is over, but the lesson sticks. Don't judge too fast. Look for the hidden power. Be strong in your own way. Linda lost because she didn't get that. Sam won because he did. Now it's your turn. What will you do with your power? How will you surprise the world? Think about it. Dream big. Be a Sam, not a Linda. See you next time, friends. Stay cool. Stay kind. And keep watching for the next big adventure. Bye.